In 475 BC, Chinese fish farmer named Fan Li wrote something that would change how civilizations fed themselves for the next 2,000 years. His treatise, the Yang Yu Jing, described a method so efficient that a single installation could produce more protein per square foot than cattle ranching, more nutrition per acre than any industrial farm. And once you built it, it would feed your family for decades without buying feed, without permits, without depending on anyone. Fan Li's method survived wars, dynasties, and empires because the knowledge was too valuable to lose. But in America, most people have never heard of backyard pond aquaculture, even though it has fed more humans throughout history than any other protein system on Earth. That silence is not accidental. Today we are building family's regenerative ecosystem in your backyard. By the time you finish, you will have a self-replicating protein factory that feeds itself, manages itself, and produces more food than your family can consume. And in 10 years, when your neighbors are worried about food prices and supply chains, you will walk out to your pond and feel a calm that no amount of money can buy. But first you need to understand what happened to this knowledge. Around 3500 BC, during the Neolithic period along China's Yellow River, farmers noticed something. After seasonal floods receded, fish, specifically carp, were trapped in low-lying areas. If they dug those depressions a little deeper and reinforced the edges with clay, the fish stayed, they thrived. They reproduced, and they could be harvested whenever food was needed. This was not farming yet, this was observation, partnering with what the land already wanted to do. By the Tang Dynasty around 1600 BC, oracle bone inscriptions reference fishing in the garden, which archaeologists now recognize as managed fish ponds, integrated into agricultural plots. The wealthy kept ornamental ponds with golden koi. Peasants maintained working ponds with common carp. Both systems fed people, but only one required permission from authorities. Then during the Tang Dynasty in the 7th century AD, something unexpected happened that revolutionized aquaculture forever. The emperor's family name was Li, the same name as the common carp, Liu. Out of respect, or perhaps superstition, the emperor banned the farming of common carp across the entire empire. Farmers faced a crisis. Carp had been their primary protein source for over 1,000 years. But instead of starving, they innovated. They began raising multiple species in the same pond. Mud carp that fed on bottom sediments, silver carp that filtered algae in the middle water column, grass carp that consumed plants at the surface, bighead carp that ate zooplankton. Each species occupied a different ecological niche. There was no competition, no waste, just a stacked, self-regulating ecosystem that was more productive than anything that had come before. This accidental policy created the world's first true polyculture system. By the time European travelers were documenting Chinese innovations in the 1200s, village fish ponds had become so common that chroniclers described them as a defining feature of the landscape. Some of these ponds were centuries old, still producing thousands of pounds of protein every year. And nobody was adding feed. The ponds fed themselves. That closed-loop ecosystem, the one Fan Li documented in his treatises and the Tang Dynasty, perfected through necessity, never made it to America in any meaningful way. When European settlers arrived, they brought cattle, pigs, and chickens, animals that required constant feeding, fencing, and labor. The idea of an edible pond that managed itself seemed too simple, almost primitive, but it was not primitive. It was elegant biological engineering. By the time the 20th century arrived, backyard ponds in America were considered decorative, not functional. Koi ponds for the wealthy, Ornamental fountains, nothing that actually fed anyone. The knowledge had been buried. But in the 1960s, during early concerns about food security, a few researchers remembered. At Auburn University in Alabama, fisheries scientists led by H.S. Swingle began studying those old Chinese methods. They built test ponds, some as small as 1,000 square feet, about the size of a modest above-ground pool. They stocked them with native species like channel catfish and bluegill, using techniques borrowed from ancient polyculture systems. The results were undeniable. Urban researchers documented yields of up to 350 pounds of fish from ponds of just 1,000 square feet, when managed with basic fertilization. To put that in perspective, a quarter-acre of cattle pasture produces about 200 pounds of beef per year and requires constant feeding, veterinary care, and infrastructure. These small ponds produce nearly double the protein, using a tenth of the space, with almost zero inputs. The studies were published, cited by a handful of permaculture enthusiasts, and then the momentum stopped. No government subsidies, no extension office programs, no agricultural colleges teaching it at scale. Because the moment you install a productive pond in your backyard, you stop buying meat from the industrial system. And the industrial meat system in America, valued at $200 billion annually, has no incentive to promote backyard protein production. But the knowledge survived. The same way it survived the Cultural Revolution in China, the same way it survived the fall of Rome. Because once you understand the biology, the ecosystem builds itself. Here is how it works. The pond is not just fish. The fish are only one piece of a four-part living system. First, you have the ducks in traditional Chinese polyculture. Waterfowl were always integrated. Ducks are not just livestock. They are the biological managers of your pond. When ducks swim, they stir up bottom sediments, releasing nutrients into the water column. When they defecate, and they do constantly, they are adding nitrogen directly into the ecosystem. That nitrogen feeds algae. The algae feeds zooplankton. The zooplankton feeds small fish. The small fish feed larger fish, and the ducks eat insects, aquatic plants, and occasionally small fish. It is a closed loop where every action feeds something else. A small flock of 3 to 5 ducks will also give you eggs. Cocky Campbell ducks, one of the most productive breeds, lay between 280 and 340 eggs per year. Per duck, that is 840 to 1,700 eggs annually from a tiny flock. Research shows that ducks with access to pond ecosystems can forage up to 30% of their nutritional needs from insects, aquatic plants, and small organisms, drastically cutting your feed costs. You are stacking functions. The ducks fertilize the water. The pond feeds the ducks. The fish clean up excess nutrients. The plants filter what is left, and you simply harvest the surplus. Second, you have the plants. Aquatic vegetation is not decoration. It is the kidneys and lungs of your permaculture pond. Cattails are one of the most efficient biological filters on Earth. Their roots pull excess nitrogen and phosphorus out of the water, preventing algae blooms and keeping the ecosystem balanced. A ring of cattails around your pond's shallow edges will do more for water quality than any expensive mechanical filter. Water lilies provide shade, which lowers water temperature and reduces evaporation. In summer, submerged plants like hornwort and anacarus release oxygen during the day, critical for fish health. Floating plants like water lettuce and duckweed absorb nutrients so efficiently that wastewater treatment facilities use them. Duckweed in particular is remarkable. Under optimal conditions, it doubles its biomass in less than 48 hours. And ducks will eat it as fast as it grows, creating a self-renewing food source that costs you nothing. Research into aquaponics, which is essentially polyculture in a controlled environment, has shown that plants can remove up to 90% of the nitrogen waste produced by fish. The plants absorb the nitrates. The water stays clean, the fish stay healthy. You do almost nothing except observe. Third, you have the fish. For most of the United States, bluegill and channel catfish are the easiest and most legal options. Bluegill grow slower but require zero care. Stock them once and they reproduce on their own, creating a self-replenishing food source. They reach harvestable size about 6 to 8 inches in roughly 2 years. Channel catfish grow faster, reaching 1 to 2 pounds within 18 months in a well-managed pond. Tilapia grow even faster and taste better. Under optimal conditions, they reach 1 pound in just 5 to 6 months. A small pond stocked with 50 tilapia fingerlings can yield 40 to 50 pounds of harvestable fish within a single growing season. However, tilapia are illegal in some states because they can become invasive in warm climates. Check your local regulations before purchasing. And fourth, you have beneficial bacteria. These invisible workers convert fish waste to ammonia into nitrites, then into nitrates that plants absorb. This nitrogen cycle is the backbone of the entire ecosystem. Once it is established, it balances itself. You are not managing a farm. You are stewarding a living system. So how do you actually build this? And more importantly, what does it cost? Let me be specific. For a family-scale homestead protein system, you are looking at a total setup cost of around $400 to $600. Depending on whether you dig by hand or rent equipment. That breaks down to roughly $150 to $300 for an APDM rubber pond liner, $20 to $50 for fingerlings, $30 to $60 for ducklings, and $50 to $100 for plants and minor supplies. Compare that to a decade of buying meat at the grocery store, and you will see why this knowledge has been quietly suppressed. First, choose your location. You want a spot that gets at least 6 hours of sunlight daily, but not full sun all day, which would overheat the water. Choose the lowest point on your property where water naturally collects after rain. If you fight your land's natural contours, you will spend the next decade fighting erosion and drainage. Mark out your pond for a family-scale setup. You are looking at roughly 10 feet by 15 feet, and 4 to 5 feet deep at the center. You can dig this by hand over a weekend, or rent a small excavator for a few $100s, and finish in an afternoon. Create a shallow shelf, about 1 foot deep and 2 to 3 feet wide around the edges. This is your marsh zone where plants will root. The deeper center is where fish will refuge during hot or cold weather. If you have heavy clay soil, you can seal the pond the traditional way. Line it with 6 inches of wet clay. Compact it by walking on it and let it cure. This method has worked for thousands of years. If your soil is sandy or rocky, use an APDM liner. They last 20 to 30 years and cost about $1 to $2 per square foot. Fill the pond with water if you are using chlorinated municipal water. Let it sit for 1 week so chlorine can evaporate. If you are using well water or rainwater, you can stock immediately. Now introduce life, but in stages. Start with the plants. Plant cattails and irises on the shallow shelves. Add submerged plants like hornwort in deeper sections. Float some water lettuce or duckweed on the surface. Let this sit for 2 to 4 weeks. The plants need time to root, and beneficial bacteria need time to colonize every surface of the pond. After a month, add your ducks. 2 to 5 is ideal for a small pond. They will take to the water immediately, and within days you will see the pond activate. The water will cloud slightly as ducks stir up the bottom. This is normal. This is the ecosystem waking up. After another month, introduce your fish. Stock about 50 fingerlings per 1,000 gallons of water. They will disappear into the depths, and you will not see them for weeks. Do not panic, do not add more fish. They are there growing in the cool, dark water. For the first 6 months, you do almost nothing. You watch the ducks, you check water clarity. You pull excess duckweed if it smothers the surface. You top off the water level during dry spells. That is it, no feeding schedules. No chemicals, no interference. The pond is finding its balance. By month 6 you will start to see flashes of silver. Your fish are visible now, and growing fast. By the end of year 1, depending on species, you will have fish approaching harvestable size. The ducks will start laying eggs within 5 to 6 months. 3 ducks will give you around 700 to 900 eggs in their first year. That is roughly 60 to 75 eggs per month, more than most families can eat. And this regenerative system will keep running. Year 2, the fish reproduce on their own. If you leave a breeding population, the ducks keep laying, the plants keep filtering. By year 3 you are not managing a project anymore. You are simply harvesting from a living ecosystem that has woven itself into your land. Now let me address something most backyard pond guides ignore: winter. If you live in a northern climate where ponds freeze, your fish can survive under the ice, as long as you maintain a small opening for gas exchange. A simple pond icer, which costs about $40, will keep a small hole open all winter. Bluegill and catfish enter a dormant state in cold water and survive under ice for months. Tilapia, however, cannot tolerate water below 50 degrees Fahrenheit and must be harvested before winter or brought indoors. Ducks are cold hardy and will continue laying through winter if given shelter from wind. A simple 3-sided coop with straw bedding is all they need. One more thing most guides will not tell you. In most states, ponds under 1 acre do not require permits or government approval. You are simply collecting rainwater and managing it on your own property. However, regulations on fish species vary. Tilapia are banned in cold states because they could theoretically establish wild populations. Catfish and bluegill are legal nearly everywhere. Check your state's fish and game website before purchasing fingerlings, but in most cases, you do not need to ask anyone's permission to build this. This is what Fanny understood 2,500 years ago. This is what the industrial food system has spent a century trying to make you forget. You do not need their supply chains. You do not need to depend on systems that can fail. You need water, sun, a hole in the ground, and the patience to let biology do what it has always done. 10 years from now, your neighbors will be anxious about food prices, about shortages, about instability. You will walk out to your edible pond, cast a line, pull a healthy fish, collect a basket of warm eggs, and feel something most people have forgotten. Sovereignty, not the loud kind that announces itself. The quiet kind that does not need to. Because you have built something that cannot be taxed, regulated, or taken away, you have built independence. If this opens something for you, if you can see yourself standing by that pond 10 years from now, subscribe so you do not miss the next system we uncover. Share this with someone who is ready to stop asking permission. The knowledge is here, the choice is yours, the pond is waiting.